Hello, and welcome to Sim.bc with the green tea. Yes, it's tea time with Sim. Am I right, people? Am I right? And it's just about, it's exactly 10 past 1 in the bloody morning. Yes, we're talking AM. And today we're going to talk about the passionate subject of the day. I'm just trying to put down my tea there. The passionate subject of the day, something that I thought was kind of interesting, and we're going to lead into it semi-direct, yeah? We're going to lead in it with a bit of an anecdote, because today I heard some people discussing how people clothe themselves. So what type of clothing people have, how they dress themselves, how they dress, what they look like, and so on and so forth. Now, these gentlemen were discussing lots of things other than this, but this was the one point that I thought was, semi-interesting. The one thing I actually listened into, right, while sitting at the table. And I would argue that they had the same sort of argumentation and the same point of view carrying over in many different aspects of the discussion, not only in the clothing discussion, but I'm just going to focus on that because I thought it was rather interesting. Now, the idea that I think that it's interesting what people actually dress like and what they wear is by, there is proof of that, because in the beginning of the year, I would like to say, or just before the beginning of the year, I was talking about how people were dressing themselves. I kind of had a project with that because I thought it was rather interesting, this idea of showing something different about yourself as you move through your life, that you're becoming a different person, you're becoming a new person, and you want to show that, right? Physically, with a new style. One of the reasons why styles are coming and going and coming and going, because people can identify with different types of styles at different times in their lifetime, right? Otherwise, you can just have the same piece of clothing and go the rest, throughout your life. Anyway, the argumentation and the discussion that people did have about it today was connecting dressing to sexuality. Which is, in a sense, I would like to start with saying wrong, because there shouldn't be any form of connection between sexuality and what people dress like. And let me just tell you why. The reason is that you can't really choose your sexuality, now can you? Some people will say, yes, you're able to choose, you're able to actually pick a free will whatever you want to do, right? I would argue it's the right for everyone to sort of identify with whatever they want, but you can't really choose your sexuality. You just happen to like guys and you're a guy, or you just happen to like girls if you're a guy, or you just happen to like girls if you're a girl, or you might be feeling like you're in between. But that's not really a choice you make. It's more about who you are, and then your choice is to, express that, and which should be supported by society. But the way that you do dress is drastically different, isn't it? Because you can choose what you dress, right? You can choose what you put on yourself. And this was sort of what they were talking about, because these gentlemen, I'm calling it in quotation marks, yeah, gentlemen, were talking about that some people who are transsexual or bisexual or homosexual or any form of that sexual that isn't heterosexual dress weirdly and dress out of the day, right? They dress to get out there. And they were arguing about this as a bad thing, that they kind of express themselves in a bad way. However, I would argue that they do express themselves, but that's because they want to express themselves distinctly going towards some form of a stereotype, right? And stereotype breaking isn't necessarily good unless you have a good message going behind it. And I would argue to show society that different sorts of sexuality is accepted in society, that's a really good way of going against an established norm and a good reason for it. Even though I like structure in the end, right? In the core of me bones, I like structure, and I would like to keep as many norms as we do have and as many laws as we do. But even I can recognize that sometimes we need to change them to fit the ever-changing society that we do have. Now, these gentlemen didn't have the same point of view, now did they? No, they said that, people are of a certain sexuality, they kind of dress out there because they want to piss us off. Which was weird. Anyway, we're gonna quickly leave that. Now, what I want to take up today is the idea that I'm talking about, you can choose your dressing, right? You can choose what you dress like. However, you can also say that you can't really choose what you think is nice. Can you? Now, can you? You can't really choose what you think is beautiful. One of the reasons for why you can't really choose your sexuality, you can just express it, and you should be able to do so. And the way that you dress yourself is maybe not such as a conscious choice all of the time. Sometimes it might just be because you think that, oh, that actually looks rather nice. I would like to try that on. And since I'm kind of for and against both of these sides, I was hit with this quite recently. The idea that someone who stands for everything or tries to accommodate everyone's opinions doesn't really stand for anything. And that's what I want to talk about today. Isn't that really interesting? Yeah? That someone who tries to accommodate everyone, right? They try to accommodate everyone as good as they can. They don't really stand for anything at all. Because if I say I like everything, it's the same as me saying I don't really like anything. Or if I say I really dislike everything and everyone, that's just the same as me saying I don't really care about anything or anyone. Because if I do dislike everything, then since dislike and like is relation, you know, they always need to exist within relation to each other. If I dislike everything, it can't really be done, right? Because that would just be an even playing field of dislike, which would mean that that's the new average. And if I dislike something slightly less, that would be me liking something, isn't it? So it's kind of weird that you try to accommodate for everyone. But I thought it was a really interesting point of view because some people who have been watching my videos told me this, that, you know, you try to accommodate for everyone when you talk, and that makes you feel like you don't really stand for anything. Except for, you know, exceptional times when I'm talking about sexuality, for instance, and now I'm like, you should be able to be whoever you want to be, and everybody who tells you differently is a piece of shit. Or when I talk about, for instance, racism, yeah? Racism isn't good. I'm not trying to show the other flip side of the coin, right? And being like, you know, it's really good with racism, really. Don't clip that. And in those cases, I'm really, you know, onto it. I'm really onwards. I'm like, you know what? I don't like racism. I don't like people hating on sexuality. I don't like the closing of the open market. I like the open market. You know, things like that. But otherwise, I try to accommodate different perspectives and different points of view. And then I was throwing this in my face, like, you know, you don't really accommodate for everything. You're like a politician, mate. And I was like, oh, dude. That hurt right in the feel, straight in the heart, just right through, with no hesitation, yeah? Comparing me to a politician. And the reason why I say that, it's not that politicians are awful people like many people would like you to believe. Even other politicians would say that. No, what I'm saying is that most politicians, they don't really talk for themselves. They talk for a party, right? They talk for the political party that they are a part of. They talk for the people who have been voting on that specific party, right? I've been talking about this lots of times, that I don't like watching politicians because they obviously try to accommodate everyone on their side, so to say, on the right or on the left, and then they're vigorously offensive to the other side just because they're supposed to be. But they still try to accommodate everyone to be on their side, which kind of, in Sweden at least, I've heard this critique several times, means that all the parties are floating closer and closer together and becoming this sort of middle ground where the spectrum is not really represented. It's just talking about nuances of the same place in the spectrum, because they're also close to the center. The right and the left are kind of, you know, they're having different ideas of how to go about things, how we're gonna reach utopia in Sweden, but they're vastly much closer to each other than if we should say the Soviet Union during in the 1980s, 1970s, 1960s, whatever, and the US, right? Just to give you an example of the right and left. In Sweden, we're a bit more close together. And that's a critique towards, you know, people try to accommodate everyone. Politicians try to accommodate everyone so that everyone can be voting for their party. And therefore, in an extent, in a certain degree, they don't really accommodate anyone. Which is also a problem for why right or left extremist parties rise up and take power. Because some people who are a very specific group but large enough feel like they are getting represented by that political party, and that's one of the theories for why those parties rose up or are actually still rising up in Europe. One of the many reasons, because the political parties in Europe are so closely intertwined, even the right and the left. I would argue that's a way of saying that we're all sane. We realize that we can't be all right and we can't be all left, because that just ain't right, is it? And I should have said correct. That just ain't correct, is it? The truth is somewhere in between. Lagom, as we say in Sweden. Lagom. But someone, yeah, as I said, told this to me and was like, you don't accommodate a specific portion of viewers, do you? You try to accommodate everyone. And to some degree and to some extent, I can understand the critique, because yeah, I kind of do. I realized. Went back, watched some videos, watched a specific video that they pointed out, and I was like, I'm really trying to take up both sides of the coin, not to piss anyone off. Even though me and with my controversial videos probably do that from time to time anyway, even though I try to bring in some perspective. But the reason for why I do that, or I would like to defend myself, right? The reason for at least where I think that I'm doing it, is that I want to present different perspectives on an issue. Because I go in there, raw footage, raw format, no script. I'm just going in there with a topic in mind, and I'm thinking like, what are the different perspectives that I can consider standing here talking about said topic? Because I might have an opinion of my own that I'm trying to persuade in the beginning, or in the end. It shifts around. Yet again, it's no clear format. But then I try to continuously thinking that, well, if I say that this is right, why is the opposite wrong? And then I try to talk for why the opposite is wrong, but I'm coming up with solid points for why the opposite might be right. Right? So I'm saying that, well, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle of these things. Now, obviously, the places where I don't do that is racism and acceptance of sexuality. That's always correct. You should always do that. A safe society is a good society, and that's good for the economy if everybody feels safe, because that means that everybody can be working and we can be specializing in actual working conditions and better working environments, and we can, release the amount of tension and pressure that we need to have in the military and the police force, because we probably shouldn't need them, because everybody feels safe anyway, because it's a generally safe society. I'm saying generally because we probably cannot attain 100% safety, even though I would like to see it happen, but that's probably not feasible, but we can get very close. Now, that was a bit of a stretch out. But so when I heard this, I was firstly offended, because I was like, I'm trying to accommodate. Okay, yeah, sure. Because then I realized, and talking about yesterday's video, I was trying to persuade myself to go over to the other side just to, just do it. But yeah, it's probably correct. I tried to accommodate lots of people in order to not piss them off. Which might not be the best of thing. I might argue, right, as I said, that I'm trying to bring out different perspectives on a certain topic, but it could be the reason that I'm actually trying to just bring in that point of view so that they feel represented in the discussion. It might be that I'll try to crush it in the end and say that, that's actually totally wrong, which would be me not accommodating to everyone. But it's still interesting for me to hear that that is a perception that can be taken up while watching my videos, because I feel like that when I'm watching politicians talk about why blue is good, and then the other side say, well, I like blue, and then the first side said, well, I like blue, and then they argue against each other as if they said different things, different colors. It's crazy, and I would not like to be one of those people, because that would undermine the entire thing that I'm trying to put forward here, because this project is a lot about me is putting forward my opinions about certain topics, and I think that's interesting. But the entire philosophy of save the earth. Green tea. Yeah, green. Think green. The entire idea of why I'm trying to put this forward today, or rather one of the ideas, is that I think it's vastly interesting, this idea that if you try to accommodate everyone, you do not really accommodate anyone. Yet again, for reasons that have been explained the last 15 minutes by me. But it's still an interesting concept to kind of look at, and to look at from different perspectives and different views. Because most people would probably argue that the way that we get to a form of utopia is when we can accommodate for everyone's needs, everyone's ambitions and dreams. And however, this is still a critique towards leadership and towards getting there, right? That we can't accommodate for everyone, because then you would accommodate for no one. However, we want to reach a point in time where we are at a euphoria, a utopia, where we can do that. Which brings up the question in my mind, right? Where do we, as a society, yeah, we changed from the channel, by the way, to society, and a societal view in the future in utopia. Quite a drastic change, if I do say so myself. But where do we, as a society, as humanity, as a people, make the change of being like, you know what, we're gonna stop talking to you guys specifically. We're gonna address the entire group. We're gonna address the entire people. When are we gonna make that change? I would argue, right? This might just be me, but I would argue that in Sweden, and this yet again might be me being really subjective because I live in the country, but I would argue that since the political parties are getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer together, which many people are criticizing, I would argue that that's sort of a sign that we're trying to move towards this idea that, well, we're trying to accommodate for everyone because we feel like we're at a stage we're safe enough so that we can actually try and do that, convey that, get to the future faster. However, if we did it at the right place in time, the right point in time, that's up for discussion and probably will be easier to see in retrospect in a couple of years' time. But I would argue that we need to try and move in that direction with political parties, just the societal views, the consensus in society should try to move there as well. However, there is a lot of problems with doing it right now because there are many people who have a problem with people with different sexuality and immigrants, as per shown by the gentleman's example I took up in the beginning, with people talking about that people with different sexualities just try to dress in order to piss them off, not the ones who are dressing, but pissing the gentleman's off, which is a very egoistic view and very weird, if I do say so myself. Because do you really think that someone on the telly is going to dress a certain way just to piss you off, who live in a house out in the woods somewhere, who barely have a cable connection, and being like, yeah, you my target, and you're like, I feel so offended by how someone dressed, and they probably only dressed that way to express their sexuality, and I hate that because no reason I can't really explain, because I'm just a sad person. Yeah. But anyway, try to accommodate for everyone, then you accommodate for no one. But when do we make the change so that we can accommodate for everyone, and that's a good thing? That's my question to you. Now, if you enjoy this video, and if you made it this far, I might add, please leave a comment in the comment section below saying that if you agreed or disagreed. And if you liked it, leave a like. If you disliked it, well, use your power and dislike it. It's good for me to get some feedback on what is good and what is bad, right? So, without any further ado, mates, sounds like I'm gonna get into another topic, but what I'm trying to say is that, see you tomorrow. Bye.